In this chapter, the protagonist begins a new chapter in their life by embarking on an academic journey at Oxford University. Torn between the desire to blend into a normal life and the pressing need to pursue their destiny, they face numerous challenges. This chapter explores themes of identity, legacy, and the struggle to balance personal growth with a higher calling. I received a sizable amount of money from my adopted parents, along with a strong dose of my mother's prompting to attend a university. I was resistant to the idea at first because I had so many things to do. I still had to find Mr. Pendragon. My parents could not find his contact details, despite my mother's extensive efforts. With only a last name to go off of, he was not easy to find. I still had to get a visa to England, which was proving difficult, especially since I had been off the grid for so long. The student visa seemed easier. My mother struck again, and I had little choice, so I decided Oxford was a good university to start with. Wasting my time seemed criminal when you think about it. Being a young adult, I knew furthering my academics was important not only for my cover, but also for myself. Even though I trained for the sole purpose of defeating the Queen, I still had a future and a desire to learn new things. One thing that interested me was the relationships between people and society and why it was the way it was. Dant was different from the village I was used to. In the village, people would say good morning. In Dant, people literally would not even look at me. I felt tension from some people. The older ones who knew my past, what little past I had. I would find out later through discussions with my father that when I was a child, I was almost lynched by the community. Some things people don't forget. Seeing me here at the house where I once lived, someone was sure to start making assumptions, and word would spread. The younger folk would not know, and most likely would not care. It was interesting how memory lasts so long. In the back of my mind, I knew things were different now. I had control. But could I appeal to their hearts and turn them? I doubted it. These people were different in motivation and action. The kids of Warm Spring desired courage and strength. The kids of Dant wanted the newest smartphone and talked like celebrities. Very different indeed, I thought. Getting into a university, especially Oxford, when I was not a native of the UK, required me to jump through some hoops. I applied for the exams that would get me the qualifications needed. Then I did the entrance exam, passing with exceptional scores. As expected, Apala and Azazel went with me too. Unlike Apala, Azazel barely managed to get her qualifications but failed the entrance exam. Azazel was torn up about it, but I calmed her distress. Worry not, this just means you can do things for our cause outside of school. You still have a role to play, and you can try again next year if you still want to, I reassured her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Azazel let the pain of it go, but was disappointed. After all, she had more to prove. Being the odd one out, who was not expected to be brave, much less a warrior. But I never brought her in for her prowess or intelligence, where Apala clearly exceeded her. She was determined and headstrong, always trying. She had more willpower than Apala, and I needed that. School in the modern world was more vibrant and lively than I was used to back at the tribal school. Maybe it was the lack of discipline. Things were freer here, even freedom of expression. It was interesting. Even Apala opened up more as time in school went on. As for Azazel, she worked at a store during the day and kept us aware of anything suspicious she found. Always studying newspaper stories and news clips for anything that seemed odd, she was using the same methodology that the chieftain used to find me. I decided a diploma in anthropology would be a nice idea. This would cover my tracks in searching for my ancestors, or at least teach me how and what to look for, and I would continue my training and look for my disciples on the side. The latter I knew was the main objective, as I couldn't defeat the Queen if I wasn't properly prepared and supported by my disciples. This is why I selected John Lambton, who was from Fatfield in northeast England. He was the floor supervisor at the dormitories at Oxford University. He was dedicated to the truth and was very intelligent in the ways of the world. John became very attached to me, as if there was a connection of some type. John was also the one who locked and unlocked the door to the library. I would always be outside with the library workers, ready to go in. We quickly became friends as we chased the same thing, truth, something that many humans lacked respect for but preached emphatically as if it was a given. The connection, I found out later, was that John too was an orphan, abandoned at birth and left at a church in Fatfield, raised by those in the priory. Easing him in was not easy with the shock of seeing us in our true forms, to prove to him I was who I said I was. Wolves. My black, Apala's white, and Azazel's brown made a strong impression on him. Shattering all his old beliefs, he wanted to know everything, how it was possible. All these wonderful things that I only had a vague idea of, but I gave him the blunt summary of what we were trying to achieve, the defeat of the Queen herself and its importance. We had to assure his silence to prevent widespread pandemonium and to avoid distractions to our goal. But in return, he wanted to become a wolf and part of our team. Almost like a giddy schoolboy, I laughed at his innocence. He would serve me well as we advanced. The training would take long, though, so patience would be important. This would make my group 4 distinct individuals ready and prepared to give his or her life in the service of the Creator. This was only half of what was expected, but I still had time. I would continue at Oxford and start searching for my legacy. Azazel made good on her free time and found Mr. Pendragon's address and phone number. When I finally contacted him, he was very reluctant to set up a meeting with the matron who had birthed me. The adoption was to be confidential and final. I really cannot facilitate your request, he said, his voice firm but not unkind. Please, you do not understand. As her son, I have to find her, I pleaded, feeling a lump form in my throat. You say that, but are you not happy with your adopted parents? I breathed out, yes, I am, but I still want to know my mother. She does not want to know you, though. Unfortunately, according to these instructions here, she wants no contact with you whatsoever. Especially now, it would threaten her royal status. I found this very curious, as I thought she would at least want to see how I turned out. Great. My own mother, my actual mother, did not want me. I breathed out aggressively as I considered what to say next. It was likely nothing would help unless I mentioned my true goal. But did Mr. Pendragon know? No, he would not. My mother would. That is why she made those demands. I cannot be talking to anyone about such things. I will try to contact her and ask her to meet you at my office. I give no guarantees, though, as she is a matron of the hierarchy of the British government, and she may not want to be brought into a conspiracy such as this, he offered, a note of sympathy in his voice. Tell her I only seek the truth about who I am, my true spirit form. Tell her that. She will understand what it means, I implored, hoping this message would reach her heart. All right, I will. A week later, Mr. Pendragon's secretary contacted me. I was grateful to hear that she had agreed to meet with me. The meeting was scheduled for the next evening at the Pendragon home. Mr. Pendragon would send a car to pick me up at the dorm and bring me to the house. The secrecy of the reunion was understandable. I just hoped the information I gathered would be as useful. I was standing outside my dormitory at the university when the car showed up. The chauffeur got out and opened the door for me, and I was on my way within seconds. Upon reaching the Pendragon residence, the chauffeur let me out and directed me through the garden to the front door. I entered and was immediately greeted by Mr. Pendragon's secretary. I was captivated by her appearance, sporting a sleeveless dress which hugged her frame and heels that complemented it well. A woman, maybe in her late 30s, but still very pretty. My varied thoughts were interrupted by her saying, "Mr. Pendragon is in the library. Please follow me." She showed me no notice but led me through the maze and announced my arrival upon entering the library. "Mr. Wyvern, sir." Yes, come in. Please be seated. Your contact is here. Please, ask your questions," Mr. Pendragon said, gesturing to an empty chair. I looked around but did not see anyone, so I just started talking, stating, "I am on a quest to find my spirit animal, and I need to know about my ancestry to be able to find out what it could be. Can you help me, please?" He did not speak to me, but I could see Mr. Pendragon nodding his head. He finally said, "Yes, ma'am." Mr. Pendragon then looked deeply at me, which made me feel uneasy. He then wrote something on a piece of paper and handed it to me, saying, "Your mother lives at this address. Go to her, and she will tell you what you need to know." Really, another mother, I thought. "Thank you," I replied slowly. "Margaret," Mr. Pendragon called, "please show Mr. Wyvern out, will you?" "Yes, sir. Please follow me, Mr. Wyvern." When we reached the car, Margaret gave me an envelope and said, "It is about your family. It is all he could find out." "Thank you, Margaret. You have all been a great help," I said politely and smiled. "Hurry, I am sure your mother wants to see you," she said as she turned to walk away. I noticed she did not smile back. I wondered if I should say something else, but I guessed it was best to leave it at that. It was not like she showed me any interest. Anyway, the queen was more important right now. I could not tarry in my lust. I must focus. I was driven back to the college. The information I was given turned out to be very useful and sent us to the far side of our imagination, to Wales, in search of a fair maiden who was to be my real mother. The information told us she had been a nurse in the Royal Navy when she had fallen for a naval commander who was later killed in action. It was weird, though. I was to be this big warrior for the Creator, and yet my nerves and stomach were on edge as we rounded the corner market, just a half block away from the house where my mother and, if I understood right, her father lived. It was almost the same feeling I'd had at Dant, that hesitation and wonder. I was part human after all. The only thing was that I was slightly different from the norm. This meant I could be tempted, and that alone scared me. I gathered focus as we neared. As we stood outside the house, the large lawn, walled property, flowers growing like a little forest, my senses elevated to a heightened awareness, and it seemed an unease gripped me. I was not accustomed to fear, but I sensed it, in a way that seemed to awaken all my senses, and then set me on the path to morphing. As I started to change, we all heard the scream coming from the house. Surrounding it, we entered the house. A young woman with red hair and a dark cloak and boots was cornering an old man and woman, her fist gripping the older woman's shirt. I attacked without thought and tore the woman away from the couple. Shattered glass and the clank of metal utensils strewn across the wooden floor echoed. More screams crashed over my ears with the collapsing of tables and chairs as I defended her. The redhead was thrown across the room, hitting the wall behind me. Apala jumped in, sidestepping and pushing him in the process, and lunged out the window. Running out of the house, the red car across the front porch was standing ready for her getaway. She tried starting the car in vain. It barely sputtered. Leaping out, she shot dark eyes back at us in the house. She did not seem to be frightened at my size and ferocity. She took up a fighting stance, and as I crashed through the doorway where the window once stood in fierce prowl, she morphed into a huge beast in a vast wave of smoke. I stopped dead in front of her, this large red beast with 4 claws and wings, not to mention a tail that looked as if it were on fire itself. She proceeded to bite at me. I advanced, using speed to undercut her attacks, but that worked only for a while. The tail sheared through me, sending me flying. A light brown blur jumped on her back, biting down hard. It was Azazel. Apala, in his pure white coat, had morphed to wolf and stood beside me. I sensed the tables had turned, but as we lunged together, she swung her left wing, striking us both and throwing us across the road. The attack also knocked Azazel off her back. Floundering in midair, she fought to right herself before landing on the pavement. A force riveting a rigorous pain in my head, I shot forward, shaking off the confusion. With pings of pain cutting into my nerves, I looked around to see my allies still by my side. I glanced at the car in its trashed state, resting upside down behind me. As I looked for her, it was too late. Her sizable 20-foot wingspan, assisted by a great leap from her hind legs, launched her lizard-like form into the air as if from a springboard. We could only watch as she flew away, and each of us in time changed from wolf to human, each wondering what had happened and where that dragon had come from. "What the hell was that?" demanded Apala. Everyone just shrugged and shook their heads. "I don't know," I said. We re-entered the house to find the man and woman still sitting in the corner where the woman had forced them. Unable to speak as I looked at her, I could see so much of myself in her. From the dark hair and eyes, her features felt so close to mine. But I knew she was not the part of what I sought, which was the heritage that would give me the direction to my true power. I needed that. She just did not fit that mold. She was unable to protect herself, and this old man was also of no help. Apala stepped forward and asked, "Excuse us. We heard the scream and came to help. What did she want from you?" They did not see her morph, so they were none the wiser of her form. My mother spoke randomly with a hint of a smile. "Who are you? What is going on? God, I must be dreaming." Apala flexed uncomfortably as he spoke. "What you saw is not something you should try to think about. That dangerous person is gone now." "And you are not dangerous?" The old man stepped in front of her somewhat. Apala came closer, almost kneeling. Apala answered, "We are friends of your—" "Excuse me, ma'am. I interjected with a glance at Apala. Listen, if we wanted to hurt you, you would have been hurt a long time ago. Besides, you already saw my true form, yes? Then you have little leverage here. All we require is information. Her face sunk somewhat. Her eyes darted away momentarily as she stood up. Well then, thank you for interceding. I suppose I should really appreciate your help. I am Coral, and this is my father, Carl Matthews. If you want to know what she wanted, it was to know where my husband was and where he lived. I was just about to tell her when you all came in. Why would she be looking for your husband? He wasn't really my husband. We were to be married, but he was killed in action before we were, she answered. I'm sorry, who was he? Was he so important that someone would be looking for him so vigorously? No, not really. His name was Jonathan Drogan, and he was from Australia. He was a commander in the Royal Navy, so maybe it was someone whose family was... She trailed off, thinking and trying to understand. You seem to be all right now, so we will be on our way, I said. Thank you, I guess, she said. Ma'am, I nodded, and with a last glance, the group left. It was obvious some things made little sense. When I was in that meeting with Mr. Pendragon, someone was speaking to him. I could not see who, but if that was the case, it could not have been my mother. I just met her. It did not seem like she recognized me, much less knew I was coming. Maybe I should have introduced myself. But something was not right. It was making me very curious. As we walked down the street, Apala questioned me. What's the matter with you? Why didn't you tell her who you were? It would have done no good, and it could have put her in more danger down the line. If she doesn't know anything, she's likely to be left out of this. Besides, telling her I was her son, she gave up on so many years ago, would only have brought pain and sorrow to both of us. Anyway, we have the information we need to continue the search. I am certain it is not her side of the family that has the warrior legacy we are looking for. No. My father is the first of possibly many branches we may need to find. I am almost certain, though, that we may have met the form of my legacy and possibly the queen herself, or one of her minions. You know, Azazel said before sighing. What is it? Both men turned towards her. That thing she turned into could be, it looked like a dragon, at least to me. I had seen drawings and pictures before and had to admit that was pretty right on the money. Apala replied, some kind of winged reptile. A flying reptile, Azazel retorted. Apala shrugged. She might be right, so we should assume that thing can also breathe fire, which in itself is a dangerous weapon. We should be more cautious. She might have other abilities and weapons too. I think we need to train harder. Definitely, especially Lambton. He needs a lot more practice. Hand-to-hand combat is not enough if we have to face off against those beasts, Apala replied eagerly. We all nodded to that. As the protagonist navigates the complexities of university life and the ever-present threat of dark forces, they inch closer to uncovering the secrets of their lineage. The journey is fraught with unexpected encounters and revelations, leaving them more determined than ever to forge their path. With allies by their side and the weight of destiny on their shoulders, the protagonist's quest continues, setting the stage for even greater challenges and discoveries in the chapters to come.